This is Glenn Hodges with Glenn Hodges Live in Washington, D.C., where we kicked off the first part of the program with a football and lessons from the legendary coach Vince Lombardi, and also my guest, the legendary Jim Stovall, author of the book The Ultimate Gift, and which was later made into a movie by 20th Century Fox. And also, Jim was an Olympic weightlifting champion. Also with us is Ollie Cantos, an attorney with the Department of Education, previously with the Department of Justice, and has just received his second presidential appointment. So thanks for being with us. I mentioned earlier that we were going to possibly get into bullying, and I kind of bullied you into suggesting you join us for this episode. Bullying is really something that's received a lot of attention over the last few years in particular, both in the school, in the environment of the schools as well as the workplace. And most of the time we think of bullying as being external, right. But could it also be internal? Ollie, let's kick off this episode with you. Tell me about bullying, what it is and what it means to you, and maybe externally and internally.
Well, as a child growing up, Glenn, it was really difficult, where there were kids who on the playground made fun of me, and they would literally put their hands in front of my face and say, "How many fingers am I holding up?" and they'd run away. Or I would be walking along and they would trip me on the playground and they'd laugh. Or there would be other instances in which I'd be walking along and then from behind, without saying something, a kid would push me to the ground and then laugh and they'd run off. Or if I knew who they were, they would say, what are you going to do, Ollie? Are you going to tell on us? Are you going to be a big baby and tell on us? I'm the teacher. Wow, I go cry. And so I was torn in a situation where I just had zero self-esteem, because I was made fun of each day and or bullied each day. And then compound that with how I had academic pressures where my parents expected me to do well in school. And so my daily life consisted of working hard to do well in school while being subjected to all this treatment from peers each day. And so the only time that began to change was when I was in 5th grade, when there was a bully named Dale. And Dale was a really tough guy, and everybody was afraid of him. And one day I accidentally crossed his path, and he said, "Hey, get out of my way." And for whatever reason, I just felt like I had had enough of all these years of torment. I said, "No, you get out of my way." And so what he ended up doing is he picked me up, and he turned around in a circle like he would swing a little kid. And when my body was parallel to the ground, he let go. And I landed on the ground, and I wasn't hurt bad, but my pride was really hurt. And I thought, oh my gosh, this is what I get for standing up for myself. And then at the end of the day, my friends Don and Robert said, "Oh, Dale's that way, let's go a different direction." And then I walked up to Dale instead, and I said, Dale said, "What do you want? Didn't you learn your lesson from this morning?" And I said, "Actually," and I reached out my hand and I said, and in a shaky voice, I said, I don't want to be your friend anymore. I don't want to be afraid of you the whole year. Can I just be your friend?" And I reached out my hand and I practically held my breath, because I didn't know if he was going to hit me, deck me, or if he was going to shake my hand. The next thing I felt was his hand in mine. It was a handshake. He said, "Sure, yeah, I'll be your friend. And by the way, I see that everybody makes fun of you. From now on, if anybody does, yell my name, I'll come running." And for the first time in my life, I felt like, wow, things had changed. And so my paradigms changed. And from there, my whole life started to move in a different direction, where I was no longer bullied the way I was. I no longer just stood and took it. But at the same time, I also thought of myself as different from the way I used to think of myself. And that's where things really began to change. The course of my life just changed forever from that point.
Well, we'll get back to internal bullying in the meantime, but in the meantime, Jim, tell me about bullying in your life.
Well, I remember a time when I was getting ready to go from elementary school to junior high school, and some of the kids in the new school, they started picking on me and they would shove me around, and And then we went home for the summer, and I had this summer when I grew almost 6 inches, and I put on nearly 80 pounds, and I later became an Olympic weightlifting champion and football player, but I wasn't always as big like I am now. So it all happened in one summer. Well, when I saw those guys in the fall that had picked on me the year before, the tables had turned, if you will. But I remember just before I went back to school, my father would take me out in the backyard, and I had, the year between I was 12 and 13, I was quite a bit bigger than him. And he said, son, you're way past the point where anybody's going to make you do anything you don't want to do. But always remember, just because you're stronger don't make you right. And you've got to learn to be right and then use your strength in powerful, productive ways. And so when I went back to school, and my tendency would have been, now I'm going to go pick on those guys. But I realized, no, that doesn't make me any better than them. And somebody stops the cycle, and it's important to do that because we need to live in a world where we're run by the best minds, not the strongest bodies. And our bodies need to serve our minds, not the other way around. And so that's kind of stuck with me all these years, and I think it's important for people to understand, and particularly young kids in school.
Thank you. Ollie, what about the internal bully? Have you ever experienced something like that?
Oh, all the time. I beat up on myself a lot of the time in the sense where I'm my worst critic. Oh, I should have said this differently, I should have done this differently, whatever it is. And those are the forces of negativity that we all have at the very back of our minds, those forces of insecurity where we wonder, are we doing this right, or do we belong where we are, or are we supposed to be here? But the thing that I learned also was that even though those forces of negativity may be in the very back of our minds, when we counter that with more positivity through the people we're around and the things that we read and the things that we focus on, then it's different. And the thing that I like to use as an analogy, where if you were to take 3 ounces of red food coloring, you were to pour it into a 3-ounce glass, then all you see there is red. That represents negativity. But what if you take that same 3 ounces, it's still there, but then you pour it into a gallon of clear water? Negativity is still there, but it dissipates. So we all have instances where we wonder, where we bully ourselves, frankly. But when we counter that with just by the sheer number of instances in which we can feel good about ourselves and that we give, etc., then that drowns out the negative feelings that can be there in the back of our minds.
Well, thank you, Ollie. Jim, what about your internal bully? Have you ever experienced him?
Sure. I mean, we can all suffer those physical attacks, but those bruises heal. But the words people say to us, we've got to take control of those. We can't let those stick with us because we all live up to the expectations we have of ourselves, or those expectations we allow other people to put upon us. And our goal and our destination will never exceed our expectations. So if you've let somebody say bad things to you for years, you get to decide whether you're going to internalize it. Am I going to be that or not? I get to decide. And we have to be very careful the messages we let other people tell us, and we need to be doubly careful, as Ollie said, what messages we're going to believe of ourselves, because we have the right to change our mind at any point in time. That used to be who I was, but it's not who I am now. My past does not equal my future, and we can do that any day we want to.
Thank you so much. Folks, this concludes part 2 of our 3-part series with Ollie Cantos and Jim Stovall. Stick around, don't leave us. Click on the link below, and we will learn about something that I think people ask themselves at many points in their lives. Is this all there is?